finish here. I hope that by the time I finish my introduction, Avner will be able to join us. I'm Vered Gutman. I'm a member of Unacceptable DC. The Zoom today, we will discuss our title is the Israeli strike on Iran and what's coming next. Early morning on Friday, Thursday night, US time, Israel launched a series of strikes against Iran, targeting its nuclear infrastructure and military leaders, as well as top nuclear scientists. Since then, Iran has launched multiple strikes in retaliation on Israel. And just last night, 11 Israelis were killed, and there are still 3 people missing in Bat Yam. This attack that was already being described as a successful one by Israeli officials leaves us with many questions that we will try to answer today. First, how much was Iran nuclear capacity set back? What does this attack mean in the broader Middle East politically and from a security standpoint, and on any bilateral current and future agreements between Israel and its Arab neighbors? Also, we want to learn how much was the US really involved with the attack and with defense against the strikes from Iran happening now. How does this new front affect the war in Gaza, if it does, and the release of the hostages? We at Unacceptable DC, as you all know, we were standing every single week for the release of the hostages, and we want to remind everyone that there are still 53 hostages held in captivity in Gaza. We have here with us 4 experts and friends to discuss all these questions. Professor Avner Cohen, trained as a philosopher and historian of ideas. He turned early on in his career into nuclear history. He's widely known for his path-breaking historical studies on the Israeli nuclear program. He is a 2-time winner of the MacArthur Foundation Research and Writing Awards. And he currently is a global fellow with the Nuclear Proliferation International History Project at the Woodrow Wilson Center. Dr. Cohen is the author of numerous books about the nuclear bomb, including the book Israel and the Bomb, and his articles on the subject were published in prestigious publications all over the world. Did Avner join us yet?
Yeah, tiny bit corrections. Unfortunately, studies at Mo and here for
That's so nice.
Good to see you.
That's so nice.
Yes, it is.
Okay, our second guest is Natan Gutman. He's the US correspondent for Israeli Public TV, Kan, and a writer for Israeli American. He's also provided commentary on major news networks, including MSNBC, CNN, BBC, NPR, etc. He's also my husband, and he's right here in the next room. Shalom. And our friend, Dan Arbel, US foreign policy, Middle East and Israel expert based in Washington, D.C. He's an associate fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies in Washington and a scholar in residence at the School for International Service and Center for Israel Studies at American University. Formerly a non-resident senior fellow at the Center for Middle East Policy at the Brookings Institute in Washington, he completed a comprehensive study on the US, Turkey, Israel triangle and co-authored studies on the US-Israel relations in changing Middle East. At American University, he has been teaching courses since 2012 on the intersection between Israeli politics and foreign policy, as well as the roots of the Arab-Israeli conflicts, and he will be able to talk about that in light of the attack in Iran. To conduct the discussion, we have our very own Dr. Boaz Atzili. Boaz is a professor at the School of International Service, American University in Washington, D.C. He holds a PhD in political science from MIT and a BA from Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and had a postdoctoral fellowship at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at the Kennedy School of Government in Harvard University. Boaz, you now take it from here.
Thank you, Vered, and thanks, Unacceptable, for organizing this. I think a lot of people need to know some information, and thank you for our three very smart guests. So I'll ask a specific question for each of you, and if you can limit your answers to about 5 minutes each, so that we'll have time for a second round of questions and then engaging with the audience. I'll start, Avner, with you because I don't know if we'll have an alarm in the middle and you'll have to run to the shelter or something. So just in case. So we'll start with the easy stuff, with the light stuff, nuclear. So my first question is this, Avner. Israel is hinting that the attacking at this point was necessary because Iran was fast approaching obtaining a nuclear bomb and the means to deliver it. What do we know about this claim? What do we know whether that is true, and how much and how important is that?
Well, it's very, very important, the evidence and why a country started to take a full action against another one. As you know, ever since 1981, when Israel removed the Osirak reactor under Menachem Begin, there has been widely known the Menachem Begin's doctrine, which said that Israel would not allow or would take actions against the creations of nuclear power, nuclear program aiming at nuclear weapons with a hostile neighbor in the Middle East. It's activated in 1981, and I must say that there has been ever since still a debate, academic and otherwise, about whether Menachem Begin was right. From my perspective, there is a great deal of questions to what extent it was indeed in the very last moment. To what degree that reactor in 1981 was suitable for nuclear weapons. Then there was 2007 when Israel attacked the undeclared North Korean built reactor in Syria. And ever since, in the last 20 plus years, 25 years, there is the growing tension with Iran with its own nuclear program. A few words about Iran's nuclear program. It's a very extensive one. It's very much identified with the essence of the Iranian regime, the essence of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran insisted about its right to have various kinds of activities, in particular enrichments of uranium to a higher level. They claimed this was part of their rights under the NPT. This was a disputable question to this day, but it was very much a flagship of the nuclear activities in the eyes of the regime there. The Iranian nuclear program is very extensive. It's taking place at multi-sites, two major sites of enrichment, one called Natanz, which was discovered after Iran in a clandestine fashion started to build it, did not declare it in 2003, 2004. And then there is the other side, which smaller one, but more protected one on the mountain near the city, the holy city of Qum. It's called Fodrol. And then there are many other places, including very suspicious sites where it is believed that some weaponization work was taken. Also, it's important to note that in the period of the 20th century, in the late 90s of the 20th century to 2003, that is to say, a little bit before the invasions of the United States to Iraq, there was experimental, small scale, but quite highly intense work on weaponizations in Iran. That activity was aimed to have 6 nuclear devices. It was never finished. It stopped with the American invasion to Iraq in 2004. There was various activities and various resolution of the UN Security Council. As we know, there was the JCPOA under Obama in 2016, which was, in the view of many experts, it was not perfect, but good enough to give a sense of protection that keeping Iran in some distance from the capacity to build a bomb, assumed 8 to 12 months or so. President Trump, in his first term, under the pressure from Netanyahu, left it. It was never replaced by anything else. And then over the time from 2019, slowly, incrementally, Iran has expanded its activities under much less safeguards and essentially created quite amount of visual materials in higher level, not the highest for military, but higher level of 60%. For military, we knew that 90%, this was 60%. They have about 275 kilograms of that, something that could be used for up to perhaps 10 nuclear weapons, being used with the right weaponization to be assembled into weapons. And some additional amount of 20%. And it should be known that technically, once you reach the higher capacities of enrichment, it's much easier in terms of time to go to the level of weaponization, which is required, as I said, 90%. Now, the safeguard system, which run by the IAEA, the International Atomic Agency system, is based in Vienna, has reasonably good safeguards, but it's about activities involving fissional materials, not about the activities involving making the bomb, what it's being called weaponizations. With a group of students of mine at the Middlebury, we looked at a number of statements, many statements that came from Iran over the last, I would say, since October 13, and compare it with statement before that. Since all this public debate, public domain kind of statement. And we came to the conclusion that there was a difference in terms of tone and in terms of attitude. Iran was much more confident in the word statements that were by very senior official saying that if you think about nuclear weapons as a car, Iran has by now all the components for the car. Just like a car, they have all the components for nuclear weapons. I thought that Iran had made incremental, slow but sure movement towards that. It was not what is being called breakout, that is to say, decision to move very, very fast towards the weapons. And I thought that Iran was probably weeks away if and when a decision to assemble a device, and again, the device is not a full weapon, would be made by the supreme leader of Iran. Final statement, I should say that Iran nuclear policy, is a balance to a degree like Israel, is a balance of elements of resolve and caution. Iran has pushed very much the limits on the one hand, enrichment, but not only enrichments. Some we know better, some we know less. We know less about weaponization. But also, they are a member under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. There are questions to what degree they are complying. And recently, there was a decision of the Board of Governors of the IAEA that Iran was in censor decision, censor resolution, that Iran violated its obligation under the NPT. But there is also a fatwa, that is to say, an imperative religious dictum against development of nuclear weapons. And most of us, people who study Iran, take that fatwa seriously. So Iran put itself in what's being called as a threshold state, getting more and more a state that positions itself very, very close to the line of having all the components for nuclear weapons.
Thank you, Avner. That's really good, and we'll go on to the next level of questions regarding what's happening now with the nuclear weapons later. So my second question is to Dan Arbel, and going a little bit to the other side, to Israel. So Israel has not specified its goals from the war so far beyond eliminating the Iranian threat, whatever that means. What are these goals in your mind? What is the end game of Israel from Israel's point of view?
Thank you, Boaz, and thank you, everybody. It's great to be here. As you said, Netanyahu did not come out clearly and state what Israel's end game is. And I think that we can divide it into several categories, being, first of all, strategic, security, politically, and personal, because we cannot disconnect Israeli politics and Netanyahu's position out of this equation. So strategically, as Avner mentioned, so while Iran has been considered a threshold state for some time and continued with enrichment of the uranium and so on and so forth, we've seen that Israel has identified this as a window of opportunity. With Trump back in the White House, the sense in Israel was that Israel could embark on such a path of attacking Iran. Also, after eliminating Hezbollah's capabilities, that was also a consideration, because the concern was that if Israel, for years, that if Israel would go on the attack against Iran, then Hezbollah would immediately enter the arena and start attacking from Lebanon. Once you remove that Hezbollah from that equation, that makes things easier for Israel to go on such an attack. The sense was also that as the U.S. began talks with Iran, and I'm sure Nathan will talk about that too, there was a sense in Jerusalem that very great unhappiness, and I think a sense that trying to undermine those talks or put an end to it or halt them or slow them down, that was also a consideration for the short term. I think that now, as this began, successful first 24 hours of the attacks on Iran, the decapitation of Iranian military leaders, of the national security apparatus, of nuclear scientists, of hitting nuclear facilities and other strategic locations around Iran, I think that the next level now to consider is what Israel really wants at the end is to draw the U.S. into the fight, because I think that Israel can continue, and it has done so. The IDF has done so, and the Mossad have done so in a spectacular manner. But continuing with these actions now will not lead to more damage to Iran's nuclear program. What is necessary is U.S. weaponry, and for the U.S. to come in, step in, and take part in it. And I think that Israel is doing what Israel wants to, is to have the U.S. drawn into this and participate actively, and not just sit and give advice from the outside. Another goal, perhaps, of Netanyahu perhaps he's hoping for regime change in Iran. We're not seeing that at this point in terms of opposition inside Iran to the leadership, and which is keeping a tight grip on things. So I don't know if we're even close to that. And I'm not a great expert on Iranian domestic politics, but it doesn't look like there's great opposition at this point to the regime. So looking to the, but one has to, as I've said in the beginning, to see this also politically in terms of from where Netanyahu stands. And clearly, after the October 7th blunder, and the 20 months of war in Gaza, which have not led to great achievements, and kind of I think that Netanyahu wants to, wanted to restart his legacy, restart the narrative on how this war is being conducted. I think it also helps him politically, as he was doing very poorly in the polls. It also helps distract attention from the Haredi exemption bill discussions that went on this week in the Knesset, and under great scrutiny and criticism. And also, it slows down his trial. People may discount that, but I think that it's all these lead me to think that Netanyahu thought that for him doing that would benefit him not only strategically as with the elements that I've mentioned, but also politically. So I think those all have. But at this point, in terms of what the aims of Israel are, while they're not clear, I think that Israel is trying to bring the U.S. into the picture, and while doing that, is trying to cause as much damage to Iran's nuclear infrastructure and program as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. So, since you brought up this issue, I'm going to turn now to Natan with a question about the U.S. policy and all that. So, the Trump administration has been careful to note so far that this was a unilateral Israeli action. But as Dan said, Israel seems to be trying to pull the U.S. into the war, especially into the to be part of the offensive war. What are the odds that this will happen, and under what conditions might the U.S. join the fray?
Thanks, Boaz. Thanks, everyone. I think that's the big question right now is what makes America get drawn into this conflict. And there are a few factors playing out here. I think key to them is the fact that President Trump doesn't want to get involved in an American war. And I'm assuming that not all of you are subscribers of Trump's channel on Truth Social, which is his social media network. And so I'll just read briefly what he posted today. He says Iran and Israel should make a deal and will make a deal. I just just like I got India and Pakistan to make in the case by using trade with the United States to bring reason, cohesion, and sanity into talks with two excellent leaders who were able to quickly make a decision and stop. And then he goes on and on to talk about his great success in preventing a war between Serbia and Kosovo and between Egypt and Ethiopia. And he says, likewise, we will have peace soon between Israel and Iran. Many calls and meetings are taking place. I do a lot and never get credit for anything, and on and on. That is Donald Trump. And that's where he stands right now. He doesn't want a war. He declared it during his campaign. He wants to end wars. He doesn't want to get involved in new wars. Donald Trump doesn't believe in a military role for the U.S. overseas. He likes the military. He likes it marching down Pennsylvania Avenue across the White House. He likes sending troops to Los Angeles. He doesn't like wasting money and American assets and lives on overseas battles, which he sees as useless. And that's his starting point. Now, he does want to get drawn into that. Does that mean that it will never happen? Not necessarily, because reality has dynamics of its own and could draw the U.S. into getting involved. How could that happen? One way is if Iran will either directly or through its proxies attack American assets in the region. The U.S. has assets, it has embassies, it has diplomatic missions, it has military bases in the region, and of course, in Navy assets in the Gulf. It's easy for Iran to target any one of these. We saw last night something that got close to that when pro-Iranian Iraqi militia launched drones towards the in al-Assad air base in western Iraq. Nothing happened there, and it didn't trigger any kind of U.S. response. But these are the kinds of things that could draw the U.S. into this war. If it does get attacked, it will attack back, and that's why we're hearing all the time from Secretary Rubio, from Trump himself, from the White House, saying, "Listen, we're not involved in the active part of this fighting, so don't retaliate against us." Other things could also draw the U.S. in. Oil prices. The Iranians are talking about shutting down the Hormuz Straits. That will immediately increase the price of crude oil around the world. The last thing that Donald Trump wants now, especially with the economy being so shaken because of his trade war, is to see people showing up at the stations just to see that a gallon of fuel is now $4 and $5 and $6. That would be devastating for him. Could draw him into some kind of military action. And there's another scenario in which Bibi, as Dan said earlier, Bibi wants to get the U.S. involved because the U.S., at the end of the day, is the only power that does have the military ability to actually bring down Iran, to actually end the Iranian nuclear program. It has the ordnance, it has the capabilities, it can do it. Now, what happens if Donald Trump says it's time to end the war? The Iranians say, okay, we're willing to talk. But Netanyahu says, no, we're continuing. We're going to keep on. And at that point, it might reach a certain decision point in which Trump is faced with a need to decide. Am I forcing Netanyahu to end the war? And Netanyahu doesn't have to agree. Or maybe I'll go with it and we will get involved and we'll try to degrade the nuclear abilities even more. And that will be eventually lead to a deal. I don't think that's very likely, but those are the scenarios, in my opinion.
Thank you, Nathan. So I'll turn back to Avner now. Avner is still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thanks. So my second question then is, what damage did the Israeli attack so far cause to the Iranian nuclear program? What damage is it capable to cause this program? How far back can Israel actually reverse the Iranian advancement towards nuclear weapons? And what if the US indeed get involved? How much more damage it can do to Iranian program?
None of us have a good, fair, detailed assessment of what was going on. Even Iran claim, and in a moment I'm going to say what they have said about their own assessment of the damage that was made, that it's very, very preliminary and it's Iranian. So all what I'm saying would be to a degree speculative and not fully supported. But the common view is that Israel, in principle, cannot make dramatic damage to the Iranian nuclear program on its own. Much of the Iranian program is deep, dug into the underground. In some cases, the Fordo facilities, it's tens and hundreds of meters into the mountain. The materials might have been taken elsewhere. It is not necessarily known where is the fission material. Labs could be damaged, but they can be rebuilt. So the view of many within the community, and again, none of us has full information to access. Iran, by the way, just said hours ago that its own outlook, that it's a very, very superficial damage that was made to the program, and it can be repaired very, very quickly. Many of us believe that that's probably true. Maybe some more than what they admit, but more or less true. I also want to say that even though tactically the Israeli attack was superb in the sense of incredible intelligence, accuracy, performance of the Israeli Air Force, which is limited, it's uncomparable in its resource with the US Air Force. What I'm concerned is that at the end of the day, and if the United States would not be involved, would not get involved, and I think it would be very dangerous politically and diplomatically to try to drag the United States when when Donald Trump feels reluctant to get into that. And if Iran does not make, which would be a mistake on their own, and attacking American targets, so far they have not done so. My concern is that Iran might do what it's promised to do. That is to say, if it's being attacked, it's going to use its clause under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, clause Article 12, to declare its right to leave, to abandon its commitment under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and without obligation to claim for the first time that it's free to seek nuclear weapons straightforward and bluntly, openly, something that they have avoided to do to this day. They have said again and again and again that they're likely to do so. They may not do so in a manner of ours because they are concerned about response from Donald Trump, but I think they are likely to do so at a soon point, and I'm very, very concerned about that. I want to emphasize one thing. Had Iran wanted to have nuclear weapons without ambivalence, without that mixture of resolve and caution, just to go straight to the bomb, there is no questions, and I think all the academic, the analytic community is agreed about that. Iran could have nuclear weapons long, long time ago. They might have been attacked. There might have been all kind of sanctions would be taken stronger than what we had before. But Iran could have. Technically, it's not that big deal for the country, 90 million people with a lot of technological infrastructure to have nuclear weapons. So I'm very much concerned that if indeed the damage is superficial and some kind of deal would be made, I think it would be difficult to make a deal, but Iran would make true of its promise to leave the NPT and to say we have the right now, we have been under attack, and develop nuclear weapons. That's a concern.
Thank you. I'll turn to Dan now with the next questions about the region beyond Israel and Iran. So tell us a bit about the regional context of this conflict. Who are the most important players? What is their position? How can they affect the situation and the war?
Yes, thank you. Looking at the region and the immediate aftermath of Israel's attack on Friday, it was interesting to note, first of all, that all the Gulf states issued strong statements of condemnation against Israel's attack. The Saudis came out expressing condemnation and saying that we're standing with against the brotherly Islamic Republic of Iran, end of quote. The UAE, for instance, condemned and said that, objecting to any breach of sovereignty of any nation, calling for dialogue. All of them, additional Gulf states, called for restraint, for ending this conflict, for trying to find ways to resolve it. And that's interesting, looking at the public face of Arab reactions to the Israeli attack. But knowing these regimes, these governments, and what they care about, certainly it's a dual approach. While they publicly condemn this Israeli attack and they're concerned, expressed concern, I think that they're cheering from the stands, seeing what Israel has done. I think that they've looked at it with great awe. I think that Israel doing the job for them, eliminating a lot of the, parts of Iran's nuclear program which can, at a certain point, pose a threat to them. to their states. So I think that in that sense, while they're condemning, I think that they're pleased with the Israeli attack. But going to the next level, I think now that Iran is responding, and now that we're kind of in a Israeli-Iranian clash, it took Iran several 24 hours to start responding more effectively. Then they're concerned of a spillover, of course, of an outbreak of a regional conflict, and they are urging now on all parties to, try and work and get to calm the situation and get to an agreement that would end this round of fighting. I think those are the messages also that they're conveying to the United States and to Europe. Looking at the region also let's look at the Abraham Accords. After 20 months in Gaza, of war in Gaza and over 50,000 casualties in Gaza, the Abraham Accord states, namely UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, did not withdraw or did not scale back the relations with Israel. There's no public display of these relations, but they did not break off relations, which is quite remarkable thinking of it. And I don't think that this current war going on between Israel and Iran will bring to a scale of any scaling back of Israel's relations with the Abraham Accord states, nor with Egypt or Jordan. I think the players that we need to look at this point are the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris, and they are likely to bring to, or at least express in diplomatic channels and other ways, their desire to bring an end to this. I think that for Israel, it would have been very helpful to take steps to bring to an end of the war in Gaza. That way, it could have gotten greater support from these countries. They could then align with Israel in a more public way or in a more effective way. And I think that Boaz wrote an article today that was published in the Times of Israel. I think that speaks to that point that ending the war in Gaza could be a good ramp off an Israeli-Iranian confrontation. On the eve of Israel's attack, we saw in the last year and 2 years, Gulf states normalizing or at least improving their ties with Iran because they felt that the U.S. is withdrawing from the region. They felt that they cannot count on the U.S. in protecting them in an effective way. So they found ways or routes to improve ties with Iran, and that was kind of characterizing recent trends on the eve of Israel's attack. Perhaps this round and with Israel ending the war in Gaza, if that ever happens, and I don't think Netanyahu wants to ever end it, but I think that could also be a way to help bring things lower tensions. So let's stop here.
Thank you, Dan. And I'll go now to the last question to Natan before turning to the audience. So on this issue of potential solution, potential end to this, the Trump administration and Trump himself is saying now that the war should end and that negotiations for a deal should begin in earnest. What kind of an agreement Trump is trying to reach? And in your mind, would that be significantly different than the agreement Obama signed with Iran in 2015 and Trump abrogated in 2018?
I think the point is that Donald Trump sees this Israeli attack, which he said is excellent, and he praised the Israeli attack, but he sees it as some kind of an interlude into or a way to enter negotiations. Trump has complained that Iran didn't take him seriously when he gave them a 60-day deadline to reach an agreement. That the U.S. presented a plan. We know that there were 5 rounds of talks between Israeli and Iranian and American negotiators. There was supposed to be a 6th one today. Obviously, it is canceled. For Trump, he believes that the Israeli attack is kind of an incentive for the Iranians. It's basically saying, no, this is the stick, I have the carrot. You should come back to the negotiation table, or else Israel will keep on hitting you with more and more attacks. So he would like to see this as a way to re-enter the negotiations. When the deal that's on the table, to the best of our knowledge, is very similar to the JCPOA. The same principles are there. The idea that Iran cannot have any open avenue towards reaching a nuclear weapon, whether it's through enrichment or through a plutonium path, or and to make sure that all these phases are under control and monitored with removal of most of the fissile material from Iran and the limitations on their enrichment. However, there is a big question that has so far derailed the talks, and that is, does Iran have the right in principle to enrich uranium to a lower level for civilian needs? Iran says, yes, we do, and we should have that. The JCPOA allowed them to do that under certain provisions. Israel is trying to convince the United States, and many in the US believe that also, that this cannot be the case anymore, that there should be a situation of zero enrichment in Iran. And that is the sticking point right now. It could be that now that the Ayatollahs have seen what Israel can do and have noticed the price that they're going to pay for insisting on that, that it will be different, that they'll show more flexibility if and when they come back to these negotiations. And there could be something creative. The US proposed some kind of a regional, international consortium to enrich uranium to low level. There are other ideas out there, but they need to be agreed upon between the sides. And I'm sure Avner can also relate to that and explain the exact differences. I think one of the questions we need to look at is, if there is a deal, how is it better than the JCPOA? The JCPOA basically pushed the threshold to a year, gave the world basically a year of notice before Iran can reach a breakthrough point and achieve a bomb. Will this new agreement bring us back to that year? Will it be more than that? Will the fact that Israel did degrade part of Iran's nuclear capabilities change this calculation? Those are the questions I would have to see if and when negotiations restart. I just want to say one more word about the bigger deal. That is a specific deal. In Donald Trump's world, he would like to see a bigger deal that would include ending this conflict with Iran and ending the Gaza war, and a bigger deal, which would include basically the expansion of the Abraham Accords, having Saudi Arabia normalize relationships with Israel, and somehow using this crisis to advance his vision of a new Middle East in which there's economic and trade cooperation between all countries, led by Saudi Arabia, the US, and Israel.
Thanks, Natan. Okay, so I'll turn to questions from the audience. Some questions have been answered already, I think, in some capacity, so I'll have to, and there are many questions, so I'll have to pick and choose. So here's the first one from Leah Haddad. For any of the panelists, there are some people who argue that this war that Israel started is a proxy war on behalf of the United States. What do you think about this claim?
I don't think so. I think it's very much a war that's Bibi's war. I think it's actually in some kind of defiance of the United States. I don't think that Donald Trump felt that his space for negotiation has been complete with Iran has been completed, and Bibi essentially took the actions ahead of Trump's. To a degree, it's a certain kind of slight. Bibi is trying to push to drag Trump into that, and it's not clear how likely it's turned out to be. I don't think that the United States and President Trump himself would like to be dragged by somebody else. It's very much against the principle and some of the base of the American First Principle. And also, I want to say to what Natan said, uh, the notion, I think there is something very, very naive that after nations of 90 million peoples, a nation who see itself as a inherit to a civilizations of thousands of years, Iran, who see itself in the last few days humiliated on right on left in so many ways, would go and agree to demands that are so against its very basic idea of itself as a nation, as a proud nations. And the enrichment is very much part of that symbolism of Iran as a proud nation. So I think to get a deal, including ceasefire, and I think that the calls for ceasefire is going to grow because I think the world would not tolerate that kind of continuation for too long. You need two for tango. And I think the situation as of now, and in particular with only one broker, which is United States, which is seen by Iranian as a bias broker, are not very likely. And then the questions about the factor of time, who the time is playing for, whether who can handle that situation, whether Israel, and Israel has limited resources. It's fast, it's nimble, it's strong, but it cannot allow itself to go into war of weeks. Definitely not to allow it to be an attrition war. This is only the third day, but there is already concern around that without a way to lead to some kind of resolution fast, it may lead to an attrition war. And Israel can start on its own, but Israel cannot end it on its own. You need two for tango. And that's why I think the current situation is very, very complicated, very, very challenging, and far from simple. I also want to say one more thing. It's a Bibi war. Bibi is a leader that, and I think it was said correctly, he's trying by taking this daring action to reset up the entire thing, restart his leadership, his failure. Iran has become a threshold state, a nuclear threshold state, very much because of Bibi's mistakes, by the fact that he pushed pushed Trump to get out of the JCPOA, and allowing in Iran from 2018 to today, 2025, to develop capacities towards becoming more and more a stronger threshold state. This is Bibi responsibility. So Bibi has a very strong incentive to correct it. Bibi is viewed by many in Israel itself, but also outside Israel, as a tainted leader who is so much full of personal agenda to recover himself, to give himself a rebirth politically. And it's a very, very problem because consideration of his personal survival, his personal coalition, his legacy, all that involved with issues about the countries and the sake of the country. And he has issue of credibility. He has issue of he is known for his manipulations, and he is not in a very easy situation in the view of many in Israel and outside.
Thank you. Natan or Dan, do you want to address this question as well?
Maybe just to add one word is again that I don't think I agree that definitely Donald Trump didn't want this war, but I think he does see it now as some kind of a potential, using it as some kind of a potential lever over Iran. And he does hope that that will drive them back into the negotiations. Not sure it will work, but I think he's trying to use that war that he never wanted.
I wanted to say that I agree with Avner about the Trump or the U.S. being the only party that could actually bring an end to this. I mean, we heard that Putin has offered his good offices, so to speak. So Iran may trust Russia, but I don't know how much Israel trusts Russia. In the same category, there are other countries that may, France, for instance, or Germany, that may be more acceptable in a way to the parties, but I just don't see them actually having the ability to supersede or actually take over and bring an end to this. And I think it all depends at the end of the day on U.S. policy. So that's what I wanted to add.
Okay. The next question is from Jane Feldman, who's asking, how does attacking civilian sites and gas or oil facilities in Iran relate to the narrative of destroying Iran's nuclear capabilities? So what if the goal is destroying Iran's nuclear capabilities, why does Israel targeting other targets that are not related to nuclear capabilities?
I can take a stab at that. I think the main idea with attacking, we saw yesterday attacks against natural gas fields, was to show Iran that Israel has the capability of debilitating its economy by taking out the energy sector. Now, I don't think right now that is something that Israel wants to do. It will cause, of course, major global mayhem and will make Israel lose its moral ground by losing the argument that we're going only after the nuclear capabilities. But it is a signal to the Ayatollah saying, if we want, we can get to that too. And that also relates to the fact that Israel launched several attacks in the neighborhoods of the supreme leader and the president of Iran, not trying to target them right now, but just sending a not very subtle signal that if we want, we can.
So there are several questions about basically when will this war end? How long will the public in Israel will be able to tolerate this war? How long the international community will be able to tolerate this war? And I think all of you touched that on some levels, but would anybody venture a guess, like how long might it take? And I would add that you always know when you start a war, you don't
Exactly.
know when it will
Exactly.
end.
Exactly. I don't think that anybody has any clear view. It's not just to any side. It's Iran has to be part of that. And there is a certain kind of paradox involved. The more humiliated Iran appears in its eyes of the neighbors, in its eyes of the people, the more stubborn and less likely Iran would be to negotiate and to make concessions. I think it's quite obvious. I think Israel should be smart not to humiliate Iran too much beyond a certain point. I think I'm concerned that Israel is going with it too far. Israelis are claiming openly that all the way to Tehran is just an Israeli airspace territory. They can do whatever they want. There are certain things that even if you have it, you don't need to talk about it that much. And I think humiliated Iran, embarrassed Iran would be very, very difficult because Iran is a proud country and a country that cannot allow itself to get that kind of defeat, especially in the first stage. So Iran has a history with along the Iran-Iraq War took years. At the end, the leader took and he drank this terrible drink and he agreed to the deal. But I think for now, after a few days, Iran has, I think, a time to tolerate and to continue because it has a sense of time is playing on its favor. I think that Israel is not used, it's already exhausted after almost 2 years of the Gaza war. And right now it would love to end it with achievement within days. And I don't think it's very, very likely. So it's open question. It's a real concern and nobody knows, I think, as of now.
Dan?
Yeah, I think in terms of when Israel would stop, I think as we've said in answering previous questions, I think once Trump or the United States decides or starts putting serious pressure on Israel to stop, I think that's when Israel will stop. Because I agree that these attacks I think that Israel has exerted and has reached, I mean, it could continue for days, hitting more and more targets, but I think in terms of its what it set out in the beginning. I think it's humiliated Iran enough. I think it exposed its vulnerabilities. I think it hit Iran where it hurts. And I think that in terms for if Israel does not succeed in withdrawing in drawing the U.S. into this, I think once U.S. pressure builds, I think Israel would certainly stop.
I think also the very talk about success in drawing the US into that is very, very dangerous. The very perception for Israel's foreign policy, and even for American Jews, to be seen as if Israel is drawing the United States not fully of its own will into something that could be complicated. Remember, when the United States dealt with the Houthis, much less with Iran, it cost $1.5 billion. Donald We lost some planes out of various kind of errors. They fell out of carriers. And Donald Trump says, enough, enough. I'm cutting losses and I'm out of it. I think to drag the United States into something which is uncharted territories is very, very dangerous.
Thank you. Next question is from Ori Nir. And Ori is asking, the official Israeli argument, simply put, is if a zealot regime openly states that it wants to destroy you and is seeking the means to do so, you must act. Does this argument sound convincing to you? Or if yes or if not, why?
I think it's a rhetorical argument that of course doesn't mean anything, especially in this region. I mean, yes, there are regimes there, and there are forces there that vow to hurt Israel or to wipe Israel off the map. And there's a whole debate going on whether Iran actually said or believes that it wants to wipe Israel off the map or not. Either way, it's clear that in terms of relating to the Israeli public, it's very easy to rally support around this kind of idea that this is an existential war. We have no choice. We have to go all the way. In practical terms, I think everyone understands that this will end with Iran having some kind of nuclear capabilities or stockpiles or enriched material with the ability to reconstruct its nuclear program if it continues unchecked. We understand also that other players in the region will be full of bad actors even after this ends. Hamas will not disappear. Hezbollah is degraded but hasn't gone away. The Houthis are still active in Yemen. Israel has a lot of enemies in the region, and they will remain so. So this notion of trying to convince the Israeli public or the world audience that somehow by fighting all the way, by continuing this war forever, you can eliminate these threats, I think it's no more than empty rhetoric.
I want to add to that. I think that the whole talk about the whole discourse about eliminations and existential threats and removal of countries and populations should not be allowed and I think that even Iran, under the present president of Iran, unlike the Ahmadinejad, which was a few presidencies ago, no longer talk in those terms. Sometimes some elements talk semi-metaphorically, use that kind of thing. But I think that even Iran is today of the current president seems to be not talking so much in terms of eliminating in other countries, bringing an end to in other countries. And one should remember, Israel is the only country in the Middle East that has built to itself means to ensure its own existence, means of existential deterrence. Israel has been very careful in what it says about its own benign nuclear weapons. It's very, very careful. Actually, to this day, it's never fully confirmed its existence. But Israel is a country that everybody knows that's my title of my book, The Worst Kept Secret. Everybody knows that Israel has this kind of capacity. And it has to be very, very careful in the way that it treats also other countries. And to make a full career, as Benjamin Netanyahu did, by attributing again and again as if Israel is just before the Holocaust, 1938, Munich and the like. I am not a great fond of that kind of rhetorics, to say the least.
I was muted, of course.
Well, maybe one
Thank you.
more question before we end up. I know people are very interested, but I think some of the speakers indicated that they might need to leave.
Okay. So there are several questions regarding the Iranian society. One of the question, for example, talks about how the war affects disunity and the divisions within the Israeli society, the war that we've been fighting for the last couple of years almost. And so the question is, what do you think? I know that none of us is an expert on Iran, but from what you know, uh, are there chances that this war will create big fissures in Iranian society that will bring to the fall of the regime? That is what several Israeli commentators are referring to, looking at some Iranians that are happy for the attacks, etc. What's your take on that?
Everybody has his own or her own speculations. I don't think that anybody can say much about the social reality on the ground. There are indications that some people in Tehran are leaving because of the bombing. The bombing is quite extensive. What does it mean? Difficult to say. The Iranian regime is a tough one. When there is resistance, it can take some measures. I would say about Israel itself, and I'm somebody who flew to Israel for personal reasons just a day before that, and I'm here, and who knows when I'll be able to leave. The dissent is no more, and the people who are questioning the wisdom and the merit of these actions and the genuinity of the Israeli arguments are no more very open. People are very muted at this point to say it in public. There is no question that Bibi's standing as of now has got a certain kind of boosting. Even all the opposition, including, for example, Yair Golan, are very careful at this point to praise and to support the IDF. It's a war that Israel has never happened before. We are under, I have been in the shelter, the local shelter, quite a few times in the last 24 hours, back and forth. So this is a time that people feel very inhabited to have criticism and to public it and all that. What would be the longer terms? It very much depends on the result of that. And there is in the air a sense of uncertainty, a great deal of uncertainty. People would love to hear good news and to see the success of the IDF and all that, but at the same time, there is also a sense of uncertainty and some anxiety.
I would just like to add, I think from the American standpoint, there's very little appetite to this idea of regime change in the Middle East. I think the American public has seen repeated attempts to enforce Western values or to install puppet regimes across the world. And even if you look at the recent history, Iraq, Afghanistan, the Arab Spring, this idea that military power can somehow ignite popular unrest. It worked in Syria to a certain point, but usually it doesn't work. And I think everyone here remembers the Colin Powell line about the Pottery Barn rule. You break it, you own it. I don't think America wants to own a broken Iran right now, and definitely not this administration. So this is not. Everyone would be happy if the Ayatollahs go away tomorrow morning, but I don't think this is a goal or one of the aims of the Trump administration. And I think Israel will have a difficult time trying to convince America that that is their goal.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll have one last questions and we'll end at 12:15. And for the last question, I want to go back to the relations between the current war and the war in Gaza. And there are several questions about that. So, to what extent do you think either coming from Israel itself, which will want to close down the war in Gaza so that it can focus on the bigger and more threatening enemy, Iran, or coming from the Trump administration, which will want to reach a deal on Gaza so that the whole region could unify on against Iran or something like that, or is it just going to play out as something as a factor that will contribute to the world paying less attention to Gaza, and Israel could continue to do what it does in Gaza, basically trying to occupy as much as Gaza as possible, doing that through very harsh means to the local population. Not to mention the hostages that are, of course, are there and will be there until there is an agreement.
Ending the war in Gaza, I think, is a political decision that Netanyahu has to agree to. Hopefully, this confrontation with Iran will serve as a ladder for him to, get off the tree and perhaps move towards ending the conflict in Gaza. But I wonder whether that'll be the case, because I think that again, I think in terms of his political partners and coalition, Smotrich, Ben Gvir, and others that are kind of have been kind of pressing and not to let go on Gaza and continue the campaign and so on and so forth. I think they may not stop that, but for him, if he gets that political boost and if he can show these achievements of weakening Iran or dealing Iran a major blow, that can perhaps serve as a way to end the Gaza war. Just let's remember, just days ago, 3, 4 days ago, Trump, in a phone call to Netanyahu, which Natan reported about, said that it's time to end the war. So U.S. patient is running out on the war in Gaza. And now with the events between Iran and Israel, it's now on the back burner again. But I'm hoping that again in the coming days, this could be U.S. pressure on Israel to stop the war may be more effective, maybe stronger. If that doesn't happen, I think that if it's up to Netanyahu right now, he's going to continue.
Natan or Avner, last word?
Just, I'm sorry.
No, I think it would serve Bibi's interest, personal, but also national interest, very brilliantly to do that. I think the leverage at this point of domestic leverage of Smotrich and Ben Gvir to leave the cabinet at this time of war is almost now, doesn't exist. So it's a time that they can take an action. You should not be afraid of anybody. It would be good for the army. It would be good for the IDF. It would be good to try to clean that kind of thing. And I think from his perspective, even to really the best to do so. He has fantastic cover to do so. And it would boost his position. He's not the leader that I support, that I believe in, that I trust. But I think that from his perspective, he should do that. And I'm a little surprised that so far no action towards that has been taken. But we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. I think this conflict now with Iran does provide Netanyahu with an exit ramp to end the war in Gaza. It gives him this sense of victory that he needs for his own legacy. It distracts from the failure in Gaza, and it may serve for the Israeli public also as a point in which we say, okay, this is where we end on a high note, supposedly, and put an end to it. However, having said that, I think we've seen Netanyahu make other choices throughout these past 2 years, and he probably has other considerations, political and others. So I'm not sure he's going to take advantage of this rare moment that we have right now.
Well, thank you so much, Avner and Dan and Natan, and thank you, Vered and Ronit, for organizing this session. Anybody wants to say something, or we? Okay, so thank you, everybody, and good luck to all of us.